All right, you lot, don't forget to give us a follow on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and while you're at it, give us a 5-star rating. Trust me, it really does help us out. You want to get your sticker on a back marker car, so like, I don't know, Williams last year or a Haas over the last couple of years, versus getting your sticker on a Mercedes or a Red Bull. Like, how much are we talking difference in terms of price for the same thing, basically?
It can be a lot. I mean, if you're going for a Red Bull, you could pay hundreds of millions over the course of.
Well, how much was the Oracle deal?
That was 500 million.
I think it was, yeah.
Goodness me.
500 million
Over
pounds
5
for
years.
Oracle, which is what a US, like they're big tech giant, aren't they, in the US?
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge amount of money.
It's crazy.
And that's before you've even started the activation. That's just for the rights and the IP and so on. But if you go down the back end of the grid, I mean, you're not going to get anywhere close to that sort of figure for a, the Williams backwards, So it really does vary hugely. But even if you go back of the grid, I mean, when I was working with Max and we were doing deals with watch brands or whatever, just having that association and being in the paddock and being part of the F1 ecosystem, it carries a huge amount of value.
Yeah.
You mentioned obviously like the back markers. I feel like these days we don't see as many sponsors on some of the back marker cars as we used to, even back in sort of the early thousands. Maybe it was just because there was more money in the sport. Is that something that you've noticed over time?
Yeah, I mean, it's been up and down. I mean, even McLaren had a big issue not too long ago where they couldn't land a title sponsor. But you look at them now, and you've got Zach Brown, who's obviously, he's the guy that founded JMI that became CSM, a huge sports marketing agency, which he later sold. But with his commercial expertise, McLaren have got 10 million sponsors. I mean, they've got everything.
It's such a good point. Yeah, when Fernando was in that car, and it was when they first changed to orange, I remember that car was just, it had like Chandon, which is like, they're like a champagne, aren't they?
Papaya, not orange.
I'm sorry. I think you've been told off that before, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
But no, it's mad how they've, like, even for, what I find interesting for certain races, so we saw that at Zandvoort, I think McLaren had a different sponsor on the side. I know in the US races, like, is that more of a modern phenomenon where you'll get like almost like title sponsors for like one-offs?
Yeah, well, you can flick your logo in and out depending on your needs. Again, so it's now much more tailored to the brand. So there's lots of reasons to do that. It could be that it's a dark market and you're a drinks brand. So if you went to Saudi,
of course
you have to swap your logo. Or we do some work with a company called Elite Vodka, and they couldn't advertise in the dark market, so they swapped the Elite Vodka logo for the Ukrainian peace dove, and used it as a way to a cause for good and show their support and stuff like that. And certain other brands will do that. They may flip it for a charity, or they flip it for, like Hilton Hotels. They have a lot of other brands apart from Hilton under their group, like Conrad and so on and so forth. So if it was written into their contract, they could switch their logo out to one of their other hotel brands, and give them some exposure for a little while. But it's case by case depending on the contract you have with the team.
And obviously the sport's grown massively in popularity since Drive to Survive's come out in like 2017. And has that reflected on, I guess, the amount of potential sponsors? Like, is it easier for you to find brands that are interested now, and are they prepared to pay more? Because I guess as F1 gets bigger, obviously there's more eyeballs, which means there's more value in having your brand on a car.
Yeah, I mean, Drive to Survive's had a massive impact, as everyone knows. It's changed the game. We've suddenly got all these races coming online in the States. We may well have an American driver next year if one or two things fall into place for Logan Sargent.
True.
The industry and the audience has changed. You've got the WTF1 effect.
What was that?
Nothing. No, I like them. I'm joking. And but they appeal to that demographic.
More kind of casual, like early fan.
There's a lot more armchair fans now. I think a load of people that watch Drive to Survive wouldn't necessarily class themselves as super fans. They're not like you. They don't know the ins and outs of the sport. They follow the soap and the drama, and sponsors have to adapt to meet the needs of that new audience. So if that means going after a different set of brands than you would ordinarily, and Formula One used to be very corporate, lots of corporate brands, and there's lots of cool brands coming into it now. So I think you just have to adapt with the times, and Drive to Survive has changed things more than anything in the last few years.
Yeah, and obviously, I think Oracle was the biggest sponsorship in the history of the sport.
I think it's got to be, because we did a deal for, we worked on a deal with the ING deal with Renault, and that was at the time huge.
They're a Dutch bank, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think that was 70 or 80 million a season, which at the time that's a huge amount of money.
And I guess they just come off 2 world titles with Fernando.
Oh, they were doing that great.
Coincided with a dip though.
Unfortunately,
bad timing.
That's not what they signed up for, is it?
No, not really. But that was a huge amount of money at the time, and they had some track advertising. I think they were title sponsor in Spa or 1 or 2 other races where it was the ING Bank Grand Prix in whatever country.
Yes.
So that was a really big deal at the time. I remember that being huge. But Ferrari with Philip Morris and things like that, floating around. But I think the Oracle one, I mean, everyone was a bit blown away when that one came around.
Yeah. What is the? I've done a lot of reading into kind of PMI and what's the McLaren tobacco
views.
What's the parent company called?
The e-cigarette one, that's Views, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. I can't remember the name of the parent because Philip Morris is the whole like classic Marlboro,
Mission Winnow and all that.
Yeah, Mission Winnow is like Ferrari kind of.
The smokes and mirrors.
Like, did you ever? Because obviously the rules. When did the rules change around tobacco advertising? Because tobacco sponsorship used to literally be the lifeblood of F1.
Yeah. I mean, those iconic cars, the Senna era and so on. When I was growing up, those iconic tobacco liveries were amazing. But weirdly, when I put myself back into my shoe, when I think back to watching racing then and seeing those iconic cars like Rothmans or Marlboro or whatever, it's funny. I never thought cigarettes. Even at the time, I just thought, what a cool looking car.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad in a way to see those sort of liveries gone. But yeah, it changed quite a long time ago. And obviously the sport is better off without cigarette brands being so blatant. But it is kind of still there. Philip Morris is still there.
Yeah.
Well, it's kind of
a sneaky way of getting it.
Yeah.
I miss West, man. That was the best one.
West, yeah.
The West McLaren is like that's the first F1 car. Mika Hakkinen in a West McLaren, that's what comes to mind immediately. But I didn't even know West was a cigarette brand.
That's what I mean.
How did I? Yeah.
I was an adult. But I guess, you've also got alcohol brands. And I guess there's a similar... Could you argue there's a similar... Because like Heineken 0.0, so it's okay if they're promoting that. You got Estrella, they've got their 0.0 as well. So... do you have to be promoting directly a non-alcohol product to be allowed on the car?
Not necessarily. In motorsport, generally, no. I mean, we with this vodka brand, which is part of the Stolly Group, they don't have a 0% drink beverage. So they have their full-on, this Formula E, but they still have their full-on logo on the car promoting their beverages. Which is fine. It only becomes an issue when you start drawing parallels between drinking and driving, and then brands have to get creative, because if you don't have a 0% beverage as a from a marketing perspective, how do you talk about that credibly? Like if I'm Budweiser and I'm sponsoring Formula One or McLaren and I don't have a 0% beer, but I want to promote being sensible and drink responsibly, how do you do it credibly? And that's a challenge that some brands have if they don't necessarily have a 0% alcohol drink.
Yeah.
But at the moment, alcohol's still certainly floating around.
I remember seeing it was the sort of drink responsibly campaign that Heineken did with Nico Rosberg. I guess that's sort of another way they can get around it by sort of promoting their own campaigns and
and they've been huge. They made a big splash.